Hello, everyone. Allison here from AllisonReeves.co, and today I have a guest for you. I'm going to be talking to my dear friend Madison from Better Half to Whole, and she's going to share a story. Our topic today is manifesting relationships after heartbreaks, and I think it's going to go in a direction that you don't really think it's going to go in, but it'll be really helpful for you whether you're in a romantic relationship, wanting a romantic relationship, recovering from heartbreak, or even just trying to manifest healthier platonic relationships. So I'm going to play our intro and then we're going to jump right into it. Hello, Madison. Thank you for coming on the YouTube channel.
Oh my gosh, thank you. This is my first YouTube channel appearance. I'm very excited.
I can't wait until you have 1 million followers, and I'm just going to be like, I think that's how Jenny will be too. Madison and I both work with a coach, Jenny, and I feel like all of her clients are just going to be like big deals someday, and she'll be like, I was there.
I was the first.
I was the first. So Maddie and I met in Colorado at Jacree. I feel like we met before that, but we didn't meet before that. I think I just seen your pictures at previous retreats. So we met at a spiritual retreat in Colorado, and I just loved your warm energy. And when I love to ask people what they do, and you were an entrepreneur. And so I had many questions. And so I kind of want you to just tell me about your business and then what made you jump into it. And then we're going to get more into the topic.
Awesome. Yes. So my name is Madison, and about 1.5 years ago, I started a company called Better Half to Whole, and I provide online resources and support for the recently divorced. And that looks like downloadable guides, one-on-one sessions with me, and then I'm in the process of putting together an online course that people could go through on their own, really to help guide them in the early days after divorce, because there's not a ton of resources that are for your practical life. Of course, there's therapy, of course, there's coaching, but there's not a lot around like your practical everyday life other than Google telling you to like get a hobby, talk to your friends.
Yeah, it's probably like run by like the Google advice is just run by like AI copyright. It's like Step 1, feel better. Step 2.
Right. Don't ignore your feelings.
Yeah. Join the dating.
I don't know. Feel better.
Yeah. And so what was it, because I know about your context, but just for people listening, like what was it that was really missing for you in your experience?
Yeah, so I got divorced in 2018, and I was right before I turned 30. And so I was pretty young to be getting divorced, and also one of the first in my family and like friend group. And so I felt like I had the support I needed in therapy to help me process what had happened, but there wasn't direction for how to actually live my life as a newly divorced person. And there just wasn't a lot of acknowledgement around how your entire social experience, or my entire social experience, shifted and changed. All of my friendships, the way people responded to me, like how I, or what I said when people would ask me like, how are you? And then to say like, I'm actually horrible, or I'm super heartbroken, or where's your ex-husband? But they didn't know he was my ex-husband until I said like, oh yeah, we got divorced 6 months ago. And then just the shock, people like, what? I didn't know. So I really created Better Half to Whole to be the resources that I wish I would have had, to help me not feel as alone and as isolated as I did. And I have heard from lots of people who've gone through divorce as well. It's super isolating. And unless you've gone through it, people can commiserate with you or want to be there and support you. But unless they've had that shared experience, they don't really get it. And so that's part of what I'm providing, is that validation for the experience. Language, like how do you talk about your situation? What do you say, when someone is like, I'm sorry, and you're like, this is a good thing.
Yeah.
So
I remember when you were talking, I had this memory. My dad actually left my mom when I was 14 years old. And so it was very painful, like, having a relationship end that way. And she worked at a church at the time, and she had people. He rode around on a motorcycle with like the new woman, and somebody was like, "Oh yeah, we saw him with it," and she's like, "Don't tell me that." And like people are
Oh,
just like,
no.
don't think, they're just making their own observations, their own experience. And so I have a million questions, but I kind of want to start by just asking like, so there's all these things you're going to bring into like the way that you help people, but what were some of the most powerful tools that you'd like discovered on your own through your experience in those first few years? And I would say we'll break it down into like kind of healing and recovering, and then like starting to manifest those new relationships, not just dating relationships, but moving into like kind of manifesting your new life and the person you want to be. But I want to start with like, what are the tools you first started creating for yourself to just kind of get through it and live a more full life again?
Yeah.
Or that may not be the right wording, but go ahead.
No, no, I totally, yes. um, One of the things that I didn't realize what I was really doing it when I was doing it. But I started a pretty comprehensive daily gratitude practice. And it was a way for me to remind myself that my life didn't totally suck in all areas. And I also didn't want like me going through divorce to become my entire personality and the only thing I could think about, the only thing I could talk about. And so the gratitude practice was really big for me, and it helped me pay attention to my life and not just to my pain.
Hmm.
Um, and so I would say that was a huge tool for me that I think when you're going through grief or a hard time, it can feel a little like annoying for people to be like, well, it could be worse, or you should be grateful. And you're like, go away. People say those kinds of things, but it's not something I shared with other people. It was just for me. Um, that was huge. I also got in, um, what am I saying? Pretty much pulled out all the stops on self care. And so I did everything I could afford to connect myself back to my body. So, massage, exercise, acupuncture, breathing, movement, all of those things to help me like come back here because I was so dissociated from my body because I was trying to survive. Um, and then I was also honest about my situation. Not to the point where I like gave everyone every little nitty bitty detail, but the partially because the end of the marriage, I was specifically asked not to share by my ex-husband. He's like, please don't tell people what we're going through.
Hmm.
Um, and so I was actively hiding that anything was going on. And so when we finally did divorce, it's not like I was screaming from the rooftops, my experience, but if people asked me how I was, I didn't hide that I was having a hard time. And I tried to be honest and say, like, I don't, like, for example, I really leaned on my brother and my sister in law. And so I had a handful of like go to people that I knew I could talk to. So, really, like what I say in some of my programming is mobilizing your support system. So, identifying like who are the people that I'm going to be able to talk to honestly. And I know they're not going to just bash my ex because that wasn't something I wanted to do. I feel like that was such misplaced energy because I needed to heal and figure my own stuff out. I didn't really want to talk about him anymore. And so having those people in place and then using my voice when I didn't want to be by myself, like my first anniversary, I said to my brother, can I just come sit on your couch and cry and watch a movie? You don't have to talk to me. You don't have to hang out with me. You don't even have to be in the room with me. I just want to not be alone today. Um, yeah, those are some of the main things I would say.
Yeah, I love that. So I want to talk more about the gratitude list and then the embodiment, but just like summarizing up this process of like the extensive gratitude practice, was like the first thing. I like, let me get my head seeing like what's going right here. And that's like a huge thing, like law of attraction in general. It's just the power of focusing on what's going well, because it's really easy to do the opposite when there's things that are going wrong. And then really getting into like the embodiment practices, like massive self-care, but also like it reminds me a lot of I have trauma like from my business. And when I started recovering from that, it was kind of a really similar process. Like the first part of it was I had to start seeing what was going well. Because I mean, it was in 2022, that was one of the most painful years of my life where I just kind of got to a point I was like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. And what started shifting things was like just starting to see the positive. I started finding like pennies on the ground was like this big thing. And then the second, like the next thing that I went through was like the embodiment practices. So regulating my nervous system, coming home to myself because I had disassociated because of the sad experience that I'd been through, but also like the past 2 years of just trying to hammer through the pain and then reaching out for the support. So it's like all these like inward practices. And I'm curious, like, well, okay, I have another question, but getting back to the gratitude practice, I think we have a shared belief in like gratitude practices can be really boring. I'm like, are you really telling me to write a gratitude list? So, what do you do to really make it like meaningful and purposeful for you?
So my gratitude practice has evolved. And so I still do, have gratitude, like a gratitude list. And that I think really helped me. Um, I don't know what happened in my brain. The gratitude practice that I had, when I was going through the early days of my divorce really helped me to pay attention to my whole life. And I think it was boring. Like some days it was literally the same 10 things from the day before because I was so emotionally exhausted. I was like, well, I have a job, like I have clean water, I have a house, so those types of things that helped me pay attention to like the super basic things. But now I still do keep a gratitude journal, but it's not quite as extensive as it was. And it's shifted into what I call abundance flows.
Mm.
And those are paying attention to all of the like gifts from the universe or gifts from people, or it's like a discount or a free coffee, or um, a friend of mine is a yoga teacher and she like has the capability to give people yoga class credits. And so she's giving me a couple classes. And so, there's the gratitude, but then also like paying attention to how many wonderful things are in my life or how many gifts are coming in. And I think that's been more exciting than my gratitude practice because it feels like, oh, what presents am I going to get today?
Mm.
Instead of just acknowledging what is, it's more expectant.
I love that. Yeah. My husband brings me a Dr. Pepper like every now and then. And it's funny because you can't see it with how we're framed, but my door is behind me. And sometimes I'll be on a live and he'll like open up the door and then he'll pop a Dr. Pepper like on the shelf behind me. And people are like, there's a ghost hand that just gave you a Dr. Pepper. Okay. I love that. Yeah. I love just looking for evidence that like things are changing, even if it's little. And finding, I mean, life is, we all say that we want certain things, but we really want those things because of how they make us feel.
Mm.
So if you can feel that way with or without the things you say you want, uh, that's what the gratitude practice does. And so moving forward, it's like a lot of what we've been talking about is like what happened and then how you got kind of out of it. That was like your healing. So at what point did things start to shift to where you kind of went out into the world or were ready to share more? Like, um, it's like we've been looking past, but like what happened to help you start moving forward, like looking forward and outward?
Mm-hmm. I think there were a couple different things. It was the acceptance that I couldn't change what had happened and that I was now in a position of I had to make all new choices for my life because the plan I had was totally blown to pieces. And so I think when I started to like try to move forward, think about what I wanted, I had to like, learn what I wanted because I thought I had it and then I didn't. And then it was like, well, what do I want now? And so I think, specific to relationships, I really got connected more closely and intimately with my friendships and with my family. And so it did feel like there was this major shift in like all of my relationships. And I think I had been super independent before, which I think was hyper independence is a trauma response.
Mhm.
And I like didn't feel like I could survive on my own after I had gone through or was going through my divorce. And so I had this totally new appreciation for relationships and connection. And then wanting that to also be present in my like future relationship. So I had to really like get connected to myself because I didn't know myself. And so how did I ever expect anyone to like connect to me or know me when I didn't know myself? So yeah, I would say I'd like gone through all the therapy, like years and years of talk therapy, and felt like, okay, well, I don't want any of that old stuff. So how do we what do I want now? So yeah, I would say like the acceptance piece, like really realizing how valuable other relationships were in my life and then figuring out, who I was or who I wanted to be, to then move into another relationship because I do love partnership and want to be in relationships of all kinds with people. So
Yeah. Yeah, and can you talk more about, like, I remember before finding my husband, I was in therapy, but I also had a mentor in dating, and it was so helpful to just, like, it kinda goes back to what we were talking about, just focusing on what I wanted instead. So, like, okay, I don't want any of that. What do I actually want? And then for me, my dating relationships before I met my husband, they were getting shorter and shorter. Every person I dated, I was, like, more clear on, like, I didn't know what was, like, an intuitive yes or no back then, but that's what it was, like, I just got more and more clear on yes and no. And so moving forward, like, what advice do you have from people who are healing from heartbreak, or maybe they've moved through it to some extent? Like, how can they start looking forward to manifesting their next relationship?
yeah, I have had a pretty recent like shift in myself as far as like dating goes. I was married, got divorced, and then was in a relationship for almost 5 years.
Wow.
We were engaged. We broke up last summer. And I just got the green light from my therapist to start dating again because she's like, I think you're ready. But what has been a huge shift for me is like the clarity around like what kind of relationship do I want, but then holding to that. And so, like, I want to have kids. So I'm not going to date anyone that doesn't want to have kids. And um, making those like yeses and nos come or be a lot quicker. But it's easier to have a like clear yes or a clear no because I'm clear on what I want. And then as far as like being in a healthier place to start thinking about and looking into future relationships is for me in the like a recent interaction with someone. He said something and I felt totally shut down and I noticed it. And instead of me thinking like I must have said something silly or he didn't like what I said, I must have said something bad. And instead of it being like something's wrong with me, it was like that behavior that he had was a turnoff. That behavior doesn't make me feel safe or seen. And so going into it's like just I'm in the early days of like being open to dating again, but approaching it not like, oh my gosh, I hope all of these people like me. It's like I'm going to be who I am I am, and I'm going to find the one that likes me, and not trying to like shift and change who I am to be what I think this other person wants. But being clear on myself so that, you know, when we do meet, that it's clear for both of us because we're clear on who we are.
Yeah. That's so amazing. It's amazing to me because it has to go in that order. Like in the way that we've like talked about all of this, because you don't know what you want if you don't know what you feel. And you can't find what you want if you aren't like, I mean, just the focus and getting grounded and happy with where you are. Because if you're only focused on what you don't want, it's really hard to manifest. And then all the embodiment practices and the healing from trauma, and then deciding what you want, which you can do and tune into now because you know what it feels like because you can feel.
Mm-hmm.
Summary. I love it. It's beautiful.
In summary.
So you have a bunch of tools, and you can go to Maddie's website, of course, but tell us like where's the best place for people to go to free resources, paid resources, etc.
I am most active on my Instagram, which is Better Half to Whole. And then everything's on my website, which is betterhalf2whole.com. And there are some seasonal freebies, and then like how to get through wedding season. And then also there's the very unmarried holiday guide, like how to navigate when you're like not feeling super cheery and also have to go to holiday parties and you're doing a lot of things probably solo for the first time in a long time. And then the paid resources are the sessions with me, and then also the course that's coming. And then also, I feel like so many people within support systems like want to help, but they don't know how. And so I also created what's called the Loved Ones Guide for friends and family supporting the divorcing. And that's really a specific resource for the people who are supporting someone who's going through divorce. When they're like, I don't know what to do, like this, read this. Here you go. Here you go.
The person who's getting divorced downloads it and says, here, stop doing all that messy shit and do this instead.
Right? Yeah.
I love that.
Here you go.
Well, thank you so much. I'm going to leave that in the description down below and in the blog post. And is there anything else you want to share?
Yeah, I think we have a little more time. I think that in regards to like relationships after heartbreak, like giving yourself time, like what you were saying, to like understand what you're feeling. Not that you have to stay there, but to like know what you have felt and know how you want to feel in the future, so that when, you know, those things are in your life, that feeling is familiar. And it's like, oh yes, I know I want to feel this way in a relationship. If it's, you know, if it is a response in the body, or if it's like, I feel seen, or I feel appreciated, or I feel cared for. But getting really clear on it is what you want, so that when it does come into your life, you can recognize it really clearly. And I think too, like you have to do some testing in a sense of like, when I first started dating, it was like, oh, do I like this kind of person? Do I like that kind of person? Do I like this, the way they talk about X, Y, or Z, you know, or do I like the way they're present with me? Or basically like learning how things felt in my body, because I think so many of us don't really have functional examples of healthy relationships to reference. And so when we're learning what that looks like or feels like in our own lives, maybe for the first time, I think we do have to give ourselves time to identify what those things are. Because relationships are also like effort. And I think that, you know, depending on how you grew up, it was like love is easy, or relationships, if they're good, should be easy. And I just think I think that's wrong. I think they can have ease, but they don't necessarily, they still require your effort and your presence, which some people say is work, you know, but it still requires something of you. And it's not all easy all the time. And I think that equating ease, everything being easy, with what real or true love feels like, I think has like done a disservice to people in relationships.
For sure. It could be dangerous too. And we change, people change. So things can be easy in certain phases, but then I change or he changes or the world changes and then it's not the same anymore and it's not going to be easy the same way. Um, I love what you said about like, I think you kind of answered my question, but I kind of want to ask it anyway. Like, in dating, you're kind of practicing what certain things feel like because you may not have had an example of what that feels like. And one thing that I try to do through some of the meditations I lead is like people want to feel supported, but they've never felt supported before. So how do you help people learn like what it feels like to be supported if maybe they haven't been supported before, or whatever it is, to be held, to be loved, to be seen, or whatever the need is? Like, how do you help people understand what that feels like if they haven't felt it before?
I think a like starting point is if there is something like I want to feel supported in my romantic relationship, thinking about are there other examples of where I have felt that in other relationships or other scenarios and using those as a reference point. Um, and maybe they don't have the language for that yet. You know, maybe they're in the early stages. It's like, it reminds me of like the emotion wheel where it's like, what's your vocabulary for how you feel or what you want? You know, you like, let's start somewhere, you know, like I want to feel good in a relationship or in a friendship. It's like, okay, well, when have you felt good in a relationship? It's like, well, when we laugh. It's like, okay, so you want to have a shared sense of humor and you want to feel levity in your relationship, or you want to think, you want somebody to think you're funny. Um, and so I would say that is really like the starting point, is to see if you have other reference points, not necessarily in a romantic relationship, but in any relationship. And even if it's not ongoing, in a situation where like, I don't know, maybe have gone shopping and you are trying something on and you're asking someone to like give you their opinion, you know, and they are maybe honest with you. You're like, great,
Mm.
thanks for telling me. And so having, you know, even reference points that are strangers, or maybe it's in media, you know, you like see another relationship and you're like, I really like how they interact or how he validated her feelings, you know, those types of things.
Yeah, I love that. Drawing on others' experiences, other relationships, and then you get closer to what it will feel like in that and what you really want.
Yeah, definitely.
Beautiful. What else? Maddie has to go pick someone up, which is why I was coming to a close earlier. I just want you guys to know I was not rushing her.
I know. I
Thank
was like,
you for telling me.
I know I'm picking up my friend's kid from the bus stop and I can't be late.
We're living life over here.
Yeah.
I think that's a good place to end it. We have our calls to action down below. Don't go anywhere. I'm going to play our outro video. The live will end, and then we'll see you all on the internet very soon. Okay.
Thank you.